So I think the big topic right now is what is going on in Russia and what are the implications for us in Europe and what should we do. So one, it's very clear that Russia is undergoing internal turmoil. I think it's the realization that we as democracies have to understand that in autocracies, things like this can happen and events can change very rapidly. We cannot control what is happening inside Russia, but we can control what we do on the outside. So what do we need to do? One is, of course, to continue to strengthen our own defense. Many of us will be going into the NATO summit in a couple of weeks in Vilnius. It's very important that we adopt the new NATO plans, that we continue strengthening the eastern flank, as has been done now actually quite well, step by step, deliberately. Also, my country is reinstating conscription, buying new weapon systems. We need to continue on this effort. Point two, we need to step up our efforts to support Ukraine. Of course, continuing with weapons and ammunition and finances, this is very crucial. But also making steps to really help them move towards the European Union, opening up the formal accession process and helping them do the reforms that they're already undertaking in spite of the war, but to help our friends in Ukraine in this way. Another point with Ukraine is to it deals with the NATO aspect, to decide in Vilnius that once the war ends, they need to be in NATO. This is the only way to ensure peace in the future. And then another point is with the rebuilding of Ukraine. Of course, we're moving forward now. That's very important, not to wait until some point in the future. The Ukrainians need housing in schools and hospitals right now. But there's lots of money sitting. It's like low-hanging fruit, the frozen Russian assets. We need to find a legal basis to mobilize these assets to help Russia pay for the damage Russia is causing in Ukraine. And another point on migration, it's another big topic that we're having. In migration around Europe, we have different situations. We have from the north of Africa where there's hope of coming to some kind of agreements with governments to stem the flows and to fight against people traffickers. But in the part of Europe where Latvia is, so our neighbor is Russia and Belarus, there's no chance of these kinds of negotiations. As a matter of fact, for more than 2 years now, we've been facing this continual pressure from Belarus, with third country nationals still being forcibly moved to try to violate the EU's outer border. This is a different kind of situation. We need to make sure that we have the legal basis in Europe to secure our outer border, because only through securing the outer border will we be able to maintain internal freedom of movement and the Schengen area, which is the basis of our single market. So these, I think, are the main points of today. I think the best security guarantee for Ukraine is full NATO membership once the war ends. All kinds of other guarantees, they're probably interesting, but what Ukraine needs and what the rest of Europe needs would be full-fledged NATO membership once the war ends.
Wagner is in Belarus. Are you afraid there could be any implications for the eastern domain?
Of course, we keep a wary eye on everything that occurs in Belarus, with Prigozhin there and an unknown number of very trained and skilled fighters who presumably will be joining him. That does potentially pose a threat. The threat would probably not be a frontal military threat, but the threat of attempted infiltration into Europe for unknown purposes. So that means we need to heighten our border awareness and make sure that we can control that.
Who should pay for the reconstruction of Ukraine?
Russia should pay for the reconstruction of Ukraine. That was an easy question. The number in Latvia, well, I don't have the number off the top of my head. I don't want to say a false figure. But every single day we see border crossing attempts. And these are groups who are moving between Poland, Lithuania, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, making various attempts with assistance from the Belarusian side. So it's ongoing, it's continual. We're very aware of the situation. We're in continual contact with our neighbors, and everyone is acting in full unison.
How your vision about enlargement policy, and as you know, Commission released oral report on Ukraine, Georgia, and Moldova. It's a last middle version of final report.
I think it's very important that the EU expands, that we take in more member states, because Russia is showing us that there really is no more room for a middle ground or a gray area. Russia views a gray area as a country to be attacked, and so we need to respond in kind with Ukraine, with Moldova, with Georgia, and also in the Balkans. And we need to move forward. Of course, every potential member state joining has to adhere to all the standards, do all the reforms. This is without saying, but we need to encourage that and work towards that as an overt goal for the European Union.
You mentioned migration. How big is that?
Sorry, what is?
Unstable Russia, potentially a greater concern.
I don't think it's a greater or a lesser concern. Russia is a concern. That's very clear. And that's why we need to do all the steps that I said to strengthen ourselves so that we can be more resilient and observe events in Russia and be ready for any contingency.
Adjust the support to Ukraine until the events end.
Well, adjust in the sense of increase our support, and I agree with what the Commission is looking forward to, having a longer-term financial commitment, which would mean stability and predictability for the Ukrainian government.
On migration, how big do you think the leaders will have to package?
I think it's a little early to say. There's one agreement on migration where there would be, if there are migrants coming into Europe, then countries either accept some proportion of migrants or help to pay for the migrants. That actually makes, I think, some basic sense. But what we need to take a look at is in which cases can and should the European Union even close its borders in cases of direct security. And I'm thinking specifically Russia, Belarus in this case. So I think that we need to continually readjust our border policy so that we don't have to deal with the consequences, but we can deal with the source. So work with countries of origin where it's possible, and where it's not possible, look at the possibility of having an ever stricter border regime.
We speak about the external borders are too close, but should we also speak about the tragedy in the Mediterranean, where 700 people died, of the responsibility of the EU and also of the EU state Greece?
No, I agree. And this is why I stress that there are different physical situations around Europe. And in the Mediterranean, I think the key is to work with the countries of origin, many of whom we can negotiate with and help to find better solutions to really stem the tide. So instead of dealing with overcrowded boats and the tragedies that occur on the high seas, it's much wiser to put in a bigger effort in working with the countries of origin. But if we have a potential to do this in the Mediterranean, we don't have that potential to do with Russia or Belarus. Well, during the war, well, of course, it's an obstacle for enlargement. I think the Ukrainians understand that as well. But right now, they are de facto being integrated into NATO through training, through weapon systems, through procedures. And at the end of the war, I'm convinced once they join NATO, they will be the most experienced and professional military that eventually will be teaching us better tactics and taking what we're teaching them now, but then they will be teaching us. EU is that's a parallel story, and there I think we have to move forward. There's no obstacle to moving forward, because even in times of peace, for any country it takes years to get ready to join. So they are very willing. They're already moving towards reforms. If corruption was a system before the war, corruption, as in all countries, it still occurs, but it's no longer part of the system. It's ever becoming the exception. We have to help Ukrainians move forward in this direction.
Quick follow-up on that. How do you strike the balance between de-risking and also keeping China engaged?
This is the million-euro question, but de-risking, I think, is the right direction to go. I think with the events in Russia, we can see that a dependence, in Russia's case it was an energy dependence, in China's case it may be a goods or a manufactured goods dependence, or part of the manufacturing chain. We need to de-risk, and that means to be able to step back to some degree, because geopolitically the growing relationship, or the apparently growing relationship between China and Russia, is a potential problem for all of us.
On Russia, now that the system has shown it has cracked, are you afraid that Putin could do something now to double down to show that he still has the authority? What are you afraid of?
I don't spend my time being afraid. I spend my time and effort into being prepared, and I think this is what we all need to do. Prepare ourselves for any contingency, strengthen ourselves, strengthen our resolve, and stay united and continue to support Ukraine. Thank you very much.